All right, here to react is Dan Henninger from the Wall Street Journal. He is also a Fox News contributor. Always great to see you, Dan. Let's follow up with what Blake was reporting regarding stimulus. It looks like the stock market, you got a Dow rally today, 250 points, NASDAQ out of correction territory. Stock market is saying we think something's going to happen with stimulus, but yet both sides are still digging their heels in.
Yeah, that's right, Jackie, though it's looking increasingly to me that the stock market, they must have sources none of the rest of us have, because nobody that I know thinks there's going to be a stimulus bill at this point. It would need to get through the Senate. Senate Republicans have been telling Steve Mnuchin and the White House, Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, they do not want to do a deal. I think at this point, Senate Republicans, Jackie, are focused on two things. One, getting Amy Barrett confirmed, and secondly, holding on to their control of the Senate. 6 or 7 of those Republican senators are at risk right now. They could lose the Senate indeed. And they need all the Republican votes they can get. And by and large, Republican voters are not in favor of spending another nearly $2 trillion on top of the $3 trillion that has already been spent. Remember, there used to be something called the Tea Party, and those Tea Party movements were formed because of the spending in Washington. They are very concerned about indebtedness, and I think if the Republicans were to vote another nearly $2 trillion, that they could put their hold on the Senate at risk.
Okay, if stimulus isn't a huge part of the equation, at least the optimism that we're seeing today, do you think it's optimism about earnings, about the trajectory of the U.S. economy as we're working our way through this pandemic, and hopefully brighter skies are ahead? Do you think that, investors are looking at the markets and saying this is still the best place to invest in?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, they could be looking at earnings, but again, the betting, anyway, is that Joe Biden is likely to win the election on November 3rd. And given everything that's in the Biden proposals for next year, you would think that would probably suppress growth. Higher taxes, including higher business taxes, which would trickle down to affect consumers. He would put a stop to or reverse much of the deregulation that the Trump administration has done to stimulate growth. So I think, and there's a sense in which the market may be trying to discount the fact that there will probably be a slower growth economy next year, and that may explain why so many Wall Street economists want a stimulus bill now. They'd like to see that $2 trillion injected into the economy ahead of the Biden presidency next year, which I think is going to be bad for economic growth.
You're saying something that I've been hearing a lot of, that the market is looking at this and saying that it's a slam dunk in some ways for Joe Biden, not necessarily taking into account what we saw last time leading up to the election. The polls did happen to have it wrong. There was a silent majority out there that voted for the president. I'm not saying it's going to happen again. I don't have a crystal ball, but it's certainly possible, Dan. Could the optimism actually be that the market thinks President Trump will be reelected?
It could be, but I mean, this is sort of based on the idea that there is a large tranche of so-called silent Trump voters. And that indeed would be the purpose, I think, of the president doing so many rallies. I mean, traditionally, you would think these rallies would be doing nothing more than solidifying the Trump base, when in fact he needs another 5 or 6% of voters to put him across 50%, the so-called undecided voters. I myself think the president really could use a big national event. He pulled out of this week's debate. Maybe there's going to be one next week, but it's a little difficult for me to see how just Trump rallies are going to put him across the goal line. I think something larger than that has to take place to close this gap with Joe Biden.
Really quick in the final moments here, we're watching big tech, we're watching the NASDAQ coming out of correction territory, and there are a lot of investors that are betting on the Amazon, Facebooks, Googles of the world. A Joe Biden presidency would be very bad for those companies.
Yeah, the Democrats have been extraordinarily critical of big tech, and I think they are probably going to move on the antitrust front to try to suppress them, and that cannot be good for the share price of those companies that have been driving the stock market for as long as they have.
Dan Henninger, great to see you. Thank you so much. Connell, we'll send it back to you.